In a rare emotional scene, Hollywood legend Leonardo DiCaprio was moved to tears on stage after receiving a heartfelt tribute from Burkina Faso's young president, Ibrahim Traoré. What started as a formal ceremony quickly turned into a deeply stirring exchange that left the audience stunned and sent ripples across social media. The powerful meeting between one of Hollywood's greatest stars and one of Africa's bravest leaders left people worldwide inspired and emotional. The hall was crowded with journalists, dignitaries, and Hollywood personalities. Bright lights illuminated the stage, yet an unusual silence filled the room. Everyone expected an evening of glamour, glittering speeches, polite applause, and predictable handshakes. But no one anticipated that something unforgettable was about to unfold. Leonardo DiCaprio, the Hollywood icon renowned for his calm composure, stood waiting backstage. He had accepted countless awards in his life, yet tonight felt strangely different. He could not explain why, but a heaviness pressed on his chest. His hands shook slightly. On the opposite side of the stage, Burkina Faso's young president, Ibrahim Traoré, adjusted his suit. At just 36 years old, he had already become a symbol of bravery and leadership for millions across Africa. His eyes were steady, his presence commanding. The announcer's voice thundered, "Please welcome President Ibrahim Traoré." Applause broke out, but Leonardo's heart began to race. For reasons he did not yet understand, he sensed this was not just another award ceremony. Something about Traoré's presence carried the weight of truth, of struggle, of hope. And soon, that weight would bring Leonardo to tears. President Traoré stepped up to the podium. He did not rush. He did not read from prepared notes. Instead, he looked straight into the audience, then directly at Leonardo, as if speaking to him alone. "Tonight is not about titles," Traoré began, his voice calm yet powerful. "It is about courage. Courage to fight for our planet, for justice, and for those who cannot fight for themselves." The audience leaned in closer. This was no ordinary scripted praise. Traoré's words carried an unusual gravity, shaped by his own struggles in leading a small nation against overwhelming odds. He turned his gaze back to Leonardo. "Mr. DiCaprio, the world knows you as a great actor. But for us in Burkina Faso, we see something more. We see a man who has used his voice to defend the earth, to defend the voiceless. For that, you are not just an actor. You are a brother." The room fell utterly silent. Leonardo blinked rapidly, trying to hide the tears forming in his eyes. He had never been honored like this, not with rehearsed compliments, but with raw, heartfelt gratitude. The moment felt different. The air was heavy, charged with emotion. Then Traoré did something unexpected. From his pocket, he pulled out a small folded letter. He held it carefully, almost reverently. "This," he said softly, "is not from me. It is from a child in Burkina Faso who insisted her words must reach you." He unfolded the letter and began to read aloud. The girl's words were simple, written in shaky handwriting, yet they carried undeniable truth. "Dear Leonardo DiCaprio, thank you for speaking for the forests, the rivers, and the animals. When people destroy our land, we suffer. But when you speak, the world listens. You give me hope that one day children like me will live without fear of hunger or war." By the time Traoré finished, Leonardo's eyes were shimmering. The audience was frozen, some already wiping away their own tears. No one had expected the evening to take such a turn. The Hollywood icon shook his head slowly, overwhelmed, struggling to maintain composure. Cameras zoomed in. Millions would later watch this moment, their hearts moved. But in that instant, Leonardo whispered, "My God," as tears rolled down his cheeks. For a long moment, the hall remained still. The silence was so deep, every breath was audible. Then slowly, someone began to clap. Within seconds, the entire room erupted into applause, not the polite kind that usually follows speeches, but a roaring standing ovation. The audience wasn't only applauding Leonardo. They were applauding the unexpected bond formed between him and a child thousands of miles away. It was a small gesture, yet it carried tremendous weight. Once again, the audience grew silent, sensing that something extraordinary was unfolding. "Do not be ashamed of your tears," Traoré said softly, his voice carrying across the hall. "Tears are the language of the soul. When words cannot bear the weight, tears can." The statement pierced everyone present. It was not rehearsed. It was not political. It was purely human. Leonardo finally lifted his head. His face was flushed, his eyes red, but there was no embarrassment. Instead, there was honesty, the kind rarely seen in Hollywood, where perfection is staged and flaws are hidden. "I thought I came here to receive an award," Leonardo murmured, his voice breaking. "But what I received is something far greater, a reminder of why we fight." Every trembling word was captured on camera, broadcast live to the world. Within minutes, social media exploded with hashtags, spreading the moment to millions. The night had shifted. It was no longer about ceremony. It had become about a connection that transcended borders. Just when it seemed the emotional peak had been reached, Traoré surprised the audience again. An aide brought a small, framed photograph onto the stage. Holding it up, Traoré said, "This is a school in my country that was rebuilt because of donations from people like you, Mr. DiCaprio. Children who once studied under broken roofs now sit in classrooms with light, with books, with hope." Gasps filled the room. The photo revealed a simple classroom with bare wall and children smiling brightly. Yet its simplicity carried more meaning than any luxurious stage set. Leonardo covered his mouth with his hand. His entire body trembled as he stared at the photo. Memories of his own childhood flashed before him, the dreams he once had, the struggles he overcame. "This is why we honor you tonight," Traoré continued, "because you remind us that one voice, one action can ignite a fire in the darkness." By now, not only Leonardo, but many in the audience were openly crying. Even the cameras shook, struggling to capture the moment. The world was witnessing something unforgettable. An actor stripped of fame, a president stripped of politics, two men standing in raw truth. A single tear slid down Leonardo's cheek, catching the light like glass. He did not wipe it away. For years he had fought for the environment, spoken at summits, and endured critics who mocked him. But here, before this young African leader, his fight finally felt acknowledged. The audience was no longer silent. Sniffles echoed throughout the hall. A woman in the front row covered her face with both hands, overcome with emotion. Even veteran reporters lowered their cameras, forgetting their work for a moment. Traoré stood tall, silent, allowing Leonardo his moment. He did not rush, did not interfere. He understood that silence sometimes speaks louder than words. At last, Leonardo lifted his head and whispered, "This is the greatest honor of my life." His voice cracked, but the sincerity pierced everyone listening. Around the world, live stream viewers typed frantically in comment sections. "I'm crying watching this. What a powerful moment. Traoré and DiCaprio, unbelievable." It was no longer just an award, it was history. The camera zoomed in as Leonardo steadied himself. His hands trembled as he reached for the microphone. I thought I understood the weight of my work," he said slowly, pausing between words. "But tonight I see it through the eyes of a child, through the courage of a leader who risks everything for his people. And I realize I've barely begun." The audience gasped. This was not a line delivered for applause. It was a raw confession that struck like lightning. Then Traoré turned to the audience. "The earth does not belong to America, or to Africa, or to any nation," he declared firmly. "It belongs to our children. And if men like Leonardo stand beside us, then perhaps those children still have a future." The hall shook with thunderous applause. Social media erupted. Clips of the moment spread across platforms within minutes. People who had never cared about Burkina Faso, or even Leonardo's activism, were suddenly watching, wiping away tears. Two men from different worlds had formed a single voice that echoed far beyond the walls of that hall. As the applause finally began to fade, Leonardo leaned closer to Traoré. The microphone did not capture his words, but a nearby camera did. His voice was faint, nearly breaking. My father once told me that true respect isn't earned on screen. It is given when you stand for something real, Leonardo whispered. Tonight you reminded me of that. Thank you, Traoré looked at him, eyes steady, and gave the smallest nod. For a brief moment, they were not president and celebrity. They were simply two men who understood the crushing weight of responsibility and the cost of hope. Backstage, organizers exchanged nervous glances. The schedule had collapsed. The event was no longer about awards or speeches. It had transformed into something raw, unpredictable, and unforgettable. On Twitter, hashtags soared to the top trends. Hashtag, your tears of truth. Hashtag, Traoré and Leo. Hashtag, hope for humanity. Some called it the most important moment of Leonardo's career. Others said it was the night Ibrahim Traoré became a global voice for dignity and courage. But inside the hall, none of that mattered. What mattered was the truth reflected in Leonardo's tears and the silent strength in Traoré's eyes. Within minutes, the internet was ablaze. News outlets interrupted broadcasts to stream the clip of Leonardo crying as Traoré stood beside him. Journalists struggled to find the right words. Headlines ranged from "Hollywood meets humanity" to "The tears that shook the world." In Los Angeles, fans who had grown accustomed to Leonardo's red carpet smiles suddenly saw him differently. They saw a man stripped of glamour, a man reminded of why he fought for something greater than himself. In Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso's capital, crowds gathered around small television sets in homes and cafes. When they saw their president's calm dignity beside one of the world's most famous actors, cheers erupted. People clapped, some cried, and many whispered, "Our leader has spoken for us all." Traoré had not come seeking applause, yet by honoring another man, he had elevated the voice of his entire nation. For Leonardo, the night had shifted from a ceremony into a life-defining moment. He did not know what tomorrow would bring, but he knew his heart would never be the same. Backstage, Leonardo's phone buzzed nonstop. Messages poured in from friends, activists, and even world leaders. Some simply wrote, "Thank you for showing us your heart." Others begged him to use this moment to push harder for climate justice. At the same time, Traoré's aides were overwhelmed by requests. Governments, NGOs, and media outlets from every continent wanted interviews with him. They wanted to know more about the president who had moved Leonardo DiCaprio to tears. But neither man seemed interested in the noise. While the world spun into frenzy, they sat together in a quiet lounge for a few minutes. No cameras, no microphones, just two men breathing after an emotional storm. Leonardo finally said, "You reminded me tonight that leadership isn't about power. It's about truth." Traoré replied, "And truth only matters when it touches hearts. Tonight, the world listened because you showed yours. That private exchange would never be broadcast, but it sealed a bond between them, a bond that could not be scripted, bought, or faked." Later that evening, the two men walked back onto the stage together. The hall was still packed, buzzing with energy. The audience expected a closing speech, but instead, Leonardo took the microphone again. "I cannot let this night end without making a promise," he said, his voice steady. "President Traoré has reminded me that words alone are not enough. So I pledge tonight to stand with him, to support projects that protect not only the earth, but the children who depend on it." The hall erupted. People leapt to their feet, applauding wildly. Some chanted Leonardo's name, others shouted Traoré's. Traoré raised his hand for silence, then added, "This is not about one man or one nation. It is about all of us. If a Hollywood star and a young African president can stand together, then what excuse do the rest of us have to stay silent?" The applause thundered again. For many watching live, this wasn't just a moving event. It felt like the beginning of something historic. And deep inside, both Leonardo and Traoré sensed it. The world would remember this night forever. By dawn the next morning, the video had surpassed 200 million views online. People across every continent shared it with captions like, "This gave me hope again," and "I cried with him." A teacher in India paused her class to show students the clip. A farmer in Brazil played it on his cracked phone and nodded silently. Even in war-torn regions, children huddled around tiny screens, watching Leonardo's tears and Traoré's calm strength. In Burkina Faso, the little girl who had written the letter sat on a wooden stool as neighbors gathered around her home. When she realized her words had reached the world and made Leonardo DiCaprio cry, her eyes filled with tears of her own. For once, the news wasn't about conflict, scandal, or tragedy. It was about dignity, truth, and the shared humanity between a Hollywood star and a young African president. For one night, it felt as though the world remembered what it meant to feel. While the media stormed with headlines, Leonardo sat quietly in his hotel room, exhausted. His phone vibrated again. This time it wasn't a politician or an activist. It was his mother. Her voice shook as she spoke. "Leo, I watched you last night. I haven't seen you cry like that since you were a child." Leonardo closed his eyes, leaning against the wall. Her words cut through all the noise. For years he had been celebrated for roles, awards, and wealth. But this moment, this bond, had touched even her. "You made me proud, son," she whispered, "not as an actor, but as a man." His eyes filled with tears once more. He whispered back, "Mom, I think I finally understand why I do." All this, somewhere else in the city, Ibrahim Traoré was with his team, reminding them that the honor given to Leonardo wasn't just a performance. It was a message to the world. Two hearts, two journeys, now connected. Of course, not everyone was quick to applaud. Some critics in the media tried to dismiss the night as just another celebrity spectacle. But as the whole story spread, the letter from the child, the rebuilt school, the raw humanity in Traoré's words, those critics fell silent. Footage of the girls' school began circulating, showing classrooms filled with laughter and learning. Journalists who traveled to Burkina Faso returned with stories no one could deny. Children proudly writing in new notebooks, teachers smiling with gratitude, communities transformed. The usual cynicism crumbled under the weight of undeniable truth. Meanwhile, Leonardo appeared again before cameras, not as a polished actor, but as a man still deeply moved. "Sometimes," he said, voice steady, "the world reminds you that awards don't matter. People do." For once, the critics had no response, and the connection between him and Traoré was no longer just a headline. It had become a symbol. On the third day after the event, while the world was still replaying the viral clip, a small envelope arrived at Leonardo's hotel. The handwriting on the front was shaky but familiar. It was from the same little girl in Burkina Faso, whose first letter Traoré had read aloud. Leonardo opened it with trembling hands. Inside, the girl had written, "When I saw you cry, I realized even the strongest people have hearts. Please don't stop fighting for the earth, because if you stop, we children will lose hope. Thank you for crying for us." Leonardo pressed the paper to his chest. His assistant found him sitting alone, tears silently falling onto the letter. That moment became private proof that the night had not been an accident. It was destiny. The bond between a child, a president, and a Hollywood actor had grown into something greater than all three, and Leonardo knew there was no turning back. By the end of the week, governments, schools, and communities around the globe had joined the conversation. In Burkina Faso, children marched with hand-painted signs reading, "Thank you, Leonardo." In New York, activists held candlelit vigils under the city lights. Leonardo and Traoré held a simple press conference together. No glamour, no red carpet, just two chairs and microphones. Reporters expected speeches, but what they witnessed was different. Leonardo said softly, "This young leader reminded me that tears are not weakness. They are proof that we still care. And if we can care, we can change." Traoré added, "The world is divided by many lines, but tonight those lines disappeared. A child's words, an actor's tears, a president's voice. Together, they became one truth." Viewers at home cried openly. Even seasoned journalists admitted later that they had wiped their eyes behind cameras. The world had paused, not for tragedy, but for hope. On the final night of the week, Leonardo and Traoré stood side by side once more, this time under the stars. The crowd was not filled with celebrities or politicians, but with ordinary people, families, students, workers. As the two men embraced, the cheers were thunderous. Leonardo lifted the child's letter high above his head, showing it to the crowd. His voice shook as he said, "This is why we fight. Not for fame, not for power, but for the future written in a child's hand." Traoré then placed his hand over Leonardo's, and together they raised the letter. Cameras flashed, but what truly mattered was the emotion in the air, pure, unfiltered humanity. People wept both in the audience and online. Millions watched live, typing comments like, "I can't stop crying. This gave me hope again." And with that, the event ended, not as a ceremony, but as a story that would live in hearts forever. Dear viewers, if this story touched you, don't just scroll away. Please like this video to spread the hope. Subscribe so you never miss stories that move hearts. And comment below about what you felt while watching. Your words matter more than you know. Let's fill the world with love, one story at a time.